Hi everyone, and welcome to the next game in the series on Capablanca. This time we're going to look at a game he played in New York in 1922 when he was world champion and during the famous 8 years when he was never beaten. His opponent was a man by the name of A. Chase. Kappa had the white pieces and opened with e4, after which came e5 and the aggressive f4, going into the notorious King's Gambit, which often leads to wild positions. Chase accepted with e takes f4, and now Kappa played the rarely seen queen f3. More common here is knight f3 or bishop c4. And queen f3 has a few ideas in mind. The open f-file can often be lethal for white's attack against the black king in the King's Gambit, and if white castles under pressure on f7 will be massive, especially with the queen on f3, and bishop c4 can also be thrown in. Another reason for queen f3 is that oftentimes black will try and hold on to the pawn at f4 here, and queen f3 immediately applies pressure to it, and white can later play d4, and the bishop on c1 will be applying more pressure. And theory's shown that in order for black to hold on to the pawn, he must make significant weaknesses in his king side, which indeed is one of the aims of the gambit. And if black lets the pawn go, then white regains the material and is able to build a strong center easily. So play continued anyway with knight c6, which is the last book move of the game, and Kappa plays c3, just preparing d4 to get a strong center and a mobile center, instead of simply recapturing with the pawn, although that would result in material equality, but it would be black who had the lead in development because he could develop another piece now. So that's what he did with knight f6. And another possibility here was queen h4 check, where best play follows g3, f takes g3, and h takes g3. And the ability to make this recapture after queen h4 check from black is another reason for white playing queen h3 in this variation of the King's Gambit, because if knight f3 or bishop c4, then this rook is falling if h takes g3. And now white gets immediate initiative because the black queen has to move, and the open h file can be an asset to to white if black castles kingside. So anyway, back to the game. Knight f6 and d4, and Kappa's achieved his ideal pawn center, which is one of the main aims of the King's Gambit. So now Chase played d5, and Kappa played e5, which is gaining good space and taking control of f6, which will be important later in the game. So now knight e4, and temporarily the knight comes to a strong outpost. So bishop takes f4, and Kappa regains the gambit pawn, and now Chase played the unwise move g5. And if he was going to play this at all, he should have played it earlier in order to support the pawn that was on f4 that he's just lost. And now it's unnecessarily weakening. It might gain a tempo, i.e. the bishop now has to move, but it also creates permanent weaknesses in h6 and f6. f6 being the most important because of the white pawn on e5. This is now an outpost square for white, which Kappa uses to great effect later in the game. The game continued now with bishop e3 and h5, and Chase seems intent on playing a wild game. It's in the spirit of the King's Gambit, I guess, but not a good idea against Capablanca. He answered with knight d2 in order to challenge black's strong knight on e4, and Chase countered that with bishop g4, which must have been one of his ideas behind playing h5, the move before. And here, as almost always, Kappa played the strongest move in the position according to Fritz. And if you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Knight takes e4 is what he played, a very creative queen sacrifice. And as you can see, there's no immediate way to get this material back after bishop takes f3, and no crushing tactics that lead to mate or anything like that. But what will exist is a position in which white will have all of the positional trumps, initiative and attacking chances. Already at this stage, Fritz assesses white as better with only 2 minor pieces for his queen, and it's a credit to Capablanca's vision that he could judge positions so precisely. And it's important to remember that he was a positional and strategic player, as opposed to a tactical one like Tal or someone like that. So how does he continue here? First with knight f6 check. getting his knight to a very strong outpost with check and forcing king e7, unless black wants to take with his queen, but that would just be crazy. He'd end up a lot of material down. And now Kappa played knight takes f3, which Fritz didn't like, preferring instead bishop takes g5, which does ensure good initiative, but it also opens lines towards the white king, and maybe this is what Kappa wanted to avoid. Best play here continues with queen b8 due to the threat of knight g8, or the knight moving anywhere and the king being in check, and after it moves then the queen falling. And now knight takes f3, king d8, knight takes d5, discovered check, bishop e7 and bishop c4 with a small advantage to white, almost a pawn according to Fritz, but like I said, the open g file could be dangerous for white. Anyway, back to the game. Knight takes f3 is what Kappa has just played, and now Chase played bishop h6, which defends that pawn with his bishop, so that if Kappa now plays bishop takes g5, there's bishop takes g5 with the danger of white skewering the black queen gone. But Kappa's attacking this pawn twice, so he can still play knight takes g5, and he's getting very well developed minor pieces in exchange for his queen. At this stage, Fritz assesses black as slightly better, about a pawn ahead, but seeing his Kappa now has 2 pawns and 2 minor pieces for his queen, that means the position is equal. Effectively, Kappa has gambited a pawn, and in return he's gradually getting a better position and able to build up the pressure now gradually. Incredibly, Chase will resign in 12 moves time from now. And here he played a weak move, bishop g7, which is moving the same piece again. It would have been better to try and get some other pieces involved, or maybe try for a pawn push on the queen's side or something like that. But interestingly, when you look at black's position, there are in fact very few useful moves that he can play to get some activity. His rooks are doing nothing, his queen doesn't have many squares to choose from, and the only square for his knight worth considering is a5, where it's completely out of the game. So we're starting to see Capablanca's understanding of positional play in action. Here he got another piece into the fray with bishop d3, and another advantage of sacking his queen was gaining the bishop pair. His light square bishop in particular is a strong piece considering black has no counterpart to neutralize it. And Chase now exchanged off his dark squared bishop, weakening his dark squares badly with bishop takes f6. And here Kappa calmly castled instead of recapturing immediately. Let's see what happens. He castled here, but let's see what happens if he plays e takes f6 check. Then king f8, and Fritz says this is the best move, again with black a pawn up in terms of material. But the point is that it would be unwise for black to move his bishop after Kappa castled in order to save it. Queen g8 is what he did play, but let's see what happens if he tries to hold on to the bishop. g7 is the only square he can move it to, but now white has a crushing attack with rook takes f7 check, king e8 is the only move, and now rook takes g7 is winning for white with plus 4.5 pawns. There are just too many threats for black to meet. For example, bishop g6 check, knight f7 winning the exchange at least, among others, so that's no good. Anyway, Kappa now continued his attack after queen g8 with the rook takes f6. And by not taking the bishop immediately before, Kappa's maintained both his strong pawn structure and his outpost at f6, and now the scales are beginning to tip in his favour. Play continued rook f8 in order to defend the weak f7, which is attacked twice, and now rook a f1, applying more pressure and forcing the passive knight d8 in order to defend. And now almost all of black's pieces are tied up defending, so Kappa immediately takes action on the queen side with b4. And here his idea is to play b5 later, so that c6 can't be played in order to defend the pawn at d5, which is very effective towards the overall strategy of attacking f7, as you'll see. So Chase played queen g7, which is another passive move, but black has little choice. He's all tied up defending and his pieces have no activity, whereas Kappa can continue to slowly build up his initiative, which he does now first with h4, stopping black from playing h4 himself and overprotecting the knight. showing good foresight regarding the likely continuations of the game. And now king e8, yet another passive move, and b5, which is the continuation of Kappa's plan. Okay, I'll do this video in 2 parts, so that's the end of part 1.